So you've heard of a granny square, but have you heard of a granny hexagon? Well, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make one. This is a tutorial that is beginner friendly, however I do recommend that you already know how to make a traditional granny square. If you've never made one before, I'll pop my tutorial for that up in this top corner. But let's get started with this granny hexagon. Just like with a normal granny square, I recommend starting with either a magic ring or a chain ring. I'm going to use a chain ring because that's my preference. So make a slip knot using your preferred method and then work a chain of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now slip stitch in the first chain to make a ring. I'm going to be crocheting our first round into that ring just like with a normal granny square. So we're now ready to start round 1. In a normal granny square we do groups of 3 double crochets, that's double crochets in US terminology. For granny hexagons we only do groups of 2 double crochets. So start round 1 with a chain of 3, this counts as your first double crochet, then work a double crochet back into that chain ring. That's our first group of 2 double crochets finished. Now work a corner group of 2 chains. 1, 2. Now work 2 more double crochets into the ring. 1, 2. And then work 2 chains. Now repeat this all the way around until you have 6 groups of 2 double crochets, so 12 double crochets total and 6 chain 2 spaces, and then I'll meet you back at the end of round 1 and I'll show you round 2. So I have just finished round 1 and I have got 6 groups of 2 double crochets. Remember that we're counting that first chain as our first double crochet, and I've got 6 chain 2 spaces including this one that I've just made. To fasten off, slip stitch into the top of the starting chain. Then make 1 chain. Cut your yarn tail to about 6 inches. Then use your crochet hook to pull that yarn tail through that chain we just made and give it a pull to tighten. So I'm going to be changing colours for every round of this granny hexagon, but if you are wanting to use just one colour for the whole hexagon, then I recommend doing the same corner technique as I use in my granny squares, and I'll link a tutorial for that technique up in this top corner. In that tutorial I show it for a square, but you do exactly the same for a hexagon. So just like with a normal granny square, I recommend turning your work over and working from the other side at the end of every round. This stops our hexagon becoming skewed and keeps those edges nice and straight. So to join the next colour, pick any of these chain 2 corner spaces and put your hook into it. Then take the tail of your next yarn colour and lay it across your crochet hook. Now use your crochet hook to pull up a loop of that new colour of yarn, and we have now joined in our next colour. So with this tail, to make sure that it's firmly in place, I like to hold it next to where I'm about to make my next crochet stitches, just to hold it into place. And I'll just pinch it there like that. So for round 2, start with a chain 3, this counts as your first double crochet, then work a double crochet back into that same space. Now skip the next 2 double crochets. Just like with a granny square, we're only going to be working into the spaces. So into the next chain 2 space we're going to make a corner group, and this is the same corner group for the whole hexagon. We work 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space. So there's my 2 double crochets. Then work a corner space of chain 2. If you're a particularly loose crocheter here, you might only want to do chain 1 corners because sometimes they can get, as your hexagon gets bigger, they can kind of poke out a little bit. Then work 2 more double crochets back into that same corner space. So as you can see, this corner group is now made. We've made 1, 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then 2 more double crochets into that corner space. And we're going to repeat this all the way around, working a corner group into each of the next 4 corner spaces. There's no chains in between these corner groups because I prefer my granny squares and my granny hexagons to be a little bit denser and not stretchy. If you usually make your granny squares with chains between the side groups, you may want to add a chain one here, but I'm not going to. So work those corner groups into the next 4 chain spaces, and then I'll meet you back almost at the end of the round and I'll show you how we finish off this final corner. So here I am almost at the end of the round, and I've worked those corner groups into all of my chain 2 spaces, and my next chain 2 space is actually the same one that we joined our yarn to at the beginning of the round. So into that space work 2 double crochets, then work a chain of 2 to finish off that corner space. Now slip stitch into the top of the starting chain just like we did at the end of round 1. Chain 1 and fasten off. So this is exactly the same as we did at the end of round 1. So that's round 2 finished. So to join a colour ready for round 3, first turn your work over. Remember, we're turning at the end of every round for this pattern, and then pick any chain 2 space and we're going to join our yarn just like we did at the beginning of round 2. So put your hook into the corner space, lay your yarn tail of your next colour across it and pull up a loop. I'm going to put my tail across next to where I'm about to be crocheting so that I can lock it into place. We're now ready for round 3. Start round 3 with a chain of 3. This counts as your first double crochet. Then work a double crochet back into that same corner space. Now for round 3 and beyond, we follow a formula just like we do with a traditional granny square. So if the next space doesn't have any chains and it's just between 2 groups of 2 double crochet, we work 2 double crochet into that space there. So we don't work into the stitches, just into the spaces. I'm going to work 2 double crochets into that space there. And then if we're at a corner space, we work a corner group of 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. And we follow this formula. It doesn't matter how big your hexagon gets, that's the basic formula for making this hexagon. My next space doesn't have any chains, it's between 2 groups along the side of the hexagon, so I know I need to work 2 double crochets into that space. And then my next space is a chain 2 space, so I know I need to work a corner group into it. As your hexagon gets bigger, you're going to have more and more groups of 2 double crochets along the side. So here my hexagon is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds, and here are some corner groups. You can see that there are 5 groups of 2 double crochets between those corner groups. So as your hexagon gets bigger, kind of every round you're increasing your stitch count by 12 because every round we're adding in an extra group of 2 double crochets on each side of the hexagon. So if you're going to count your stitches, every round will be a multiple of 12. So for round 1, 1 times 12, 12, so you should have 12 stitches. If you're on round 2, 2 times 12, you should have 24 stitches. If you're on round 7, you should have 7 times 12, which is 84, so you should have 84 stitches. So that's a really good way of checking you've got the right stitch count. If you are a beginner and you're struggling to work out where your corner spaces is, stitch markers are your best friends, so just pop a stitch marker into those corner spaces. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick tutorial for a granny hexagon. It really is as simple as a granny square. If you love the look of the hexagons but you don't like these holes, I do have a tutorial for a solid hexagon blanket that I'll pop up here on the screen for you to try next. Hopefully I'll see you in another tutorial soon.